This program contains coarse language and discusses mature themes. Viewer discretion is advised.
What's happening is that a lot of people have been messaging me, Matt, on my account, wanting to know more about opening up your relationship and or marriage, how to go about it. There's questions in line with, of course, the usual suspects like jealousy, or just how do you approach it, particularly if you're a guy that's interested in other men, if you're with a woman, and just the way to navigate like different apps or websites or how to meet people, finding a community, literature, all those sorts of things. So I just wanted to do like a brief, but a little bit more of an in-depth, detailed crash course into different options. And of course, if you jump in the middle of this, please Q&A. That's the whole point about doing this live. So yeah, let me just check the technical stuff here since I am my own engineer today.
Beep, boop, beep, boop, beep, boop.
I guess, and you can tell me your thoughts about this. We've talked about you and your non-monogamy experience before, and you were the unicorn to different couples throughout all of eternity.
Yeah, I don't know about that, but
how old were you when that all began?
I think my first, I was in my second year of undergrad, so I was 19.
19, yeah.
20,
Wow.
19, 20.
Okay, all right. Yeah, I guess, around that time, there was a lot of like hormones still raging with me and trying to figure things out, and just like a lot of pumped up like frustration about stuff. And at the time I was dating someone, like we lost our virginity to each other, and I thought, oh my gosh, we're gonna be married, like this is the one. And I've told this story before, but for people who don't know, the story of my first ever girlfriend was that we were in college, and then we were together for 2 years, and I knew she had a crush on this guy, Mike. And
Classic Mike.
well, a couple things about Mike. First of all, Mike was a Republican.
Okay.
Yeah, I know. I'm like, really? But actually, not knowing his personality very well, part of me inside was like, oh man, what happens if they fucked? What happens if I know she has a little bit of a crush on this guy? What if they just like slept together? So I approached my then girlfriend and was like, hey, you and Mike, would it be crazy if you guys did something, and just reported back and told me about it. Oh my God, that was so hot. There was like something inside me where I was like, like getting like butterflies all over again as a teenager.
It was a good feeling.
It was good, but it was taboo. And at the time I was like, I would get a little bit angry thinking about it, but the anger that I was feeling, or I should say like the jealousy I was feeling. And there was jealousy, or at least what I thought was jealousy. And the jealousy wasn't turned into anger necessarily. The jealousy was turned into arousal.
Okay.
But that like fiery burning in my chest was still there. But instead of getting all mad about it, I just got horny, So it's like,
hey, there you go.
Why that's my philosophy on most of life. It's like, why get mad when you can get off?
Hey, let's coin that one for later.
Again, so any questions? This is more of a little spiel about opening up your marriage or your relationship, or even if you're not in a relationship now, maybe you're aspiring to be in an ethically non-monogamous relationship, and that's okay too.
Yeah.
So again, well, going back for a second, I just want to contextualize everything to what it used to be and where we're at now as in Western society when it comes to this stuff.
Yeah.
And for everyone who grew up knowing only one thing or one certain way of life, that is not the only way of going about things. And there are things that are ethical and there are things that are less ethical. And for the purpose of this conversation, anything that is consenting amongst adults,
Yeah.
for the majority, goes underneath the umbrella of ethical.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
I saw someone tweet the other day, like, well, what about unethical monogamy or non-monogamy? Like, no, that's cheating, actually.
Yeah, that can still, I mean, people often say like, oh, well, outsiders, oh, you're non-monogamous. So basically you're just a professional cheater.
Right. It's like that's actually the farthest thing from what it is. Like to me, ethical non-monogamy is just full, complete communication about the goods, the bads. What are you feeling like? For me, this was my first non-monogamous relationship. And so I had to do a lot of soul searching and asking myself questions and, okay, I'm feeling this way. Why am I feeling this way? Where is that coming from? And then what am I going to do about it? Because I knew that it was something that I was enjoying, but like for me, it took me a few months to like be okay, if not more than a few months, to be okay with even the thought of you, like seeing you with another woman. And so I had to really and I was, open with you about, okay, I'm feeling this way. It makes me really nervous. And so that's also part of it, is just the communicating, even when, you're not you feel a certain way about something that, is triggered by your past. And then I started doing some research on it and reading about it and, listening to what other people had to say about their journey. Because, you had been kind of practicing this way of life for over a decade. And this was something brand new for me.
Yeah. And it's also good to normalize the fact that being new is okay.
Yes.
And a lot of the people that we meet in New York City apologize before they even say anything. They're like, I'm so sorry. I'm just so new.
It's like,
I'm like, but you
that's
were
okay.
new more or less like a year ago.
I still feel new. So
you're just on the fast track.
Yes.
You're making up for lost time.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I had to me, it's like a little bit of a process. It's always a process, always evolving and changing, but being respectful of your partner and what they're feeling and how you're feeling. And there are going to be good times, or not everything's going to be perfect, and allow yourself the chance to fail if done with the best intention.
Right. Which brings me back to the story. So contextualizing everything in the history of what's been going on in our culture for the last 15 years. And we are very lucky that we live in New York City. We're very lucky to have the friends that we have, to come across the resources that we've had. But man, back when I started experimenting, when I was 18, 19, 20 years old, which wasn't even that long ago, but the only resource that we had was the Craigslist Casual Encounters website.
Yes.
Any comments so far?
Yeah. Have either one of you had a hard time getting over an ex and kept you from forming a new relationship? What helped moving on?
So in thank you. In terms of non-monogamy, or just in terms of moving on from a different relationship? Because oftentimes people in this world, they try to open up their relationship to non-monogamy. It doesn't work. One person gets freaked out. They flip out. And in terms of my first girlfriend, when I said, hey, wouldn't it be awesome if maybe you I don't know, slept with that guy I know you have a crush on, she thought I wanted to break up with her and that I was throwing her off onto another guy. But honestly, I didn't have the vocabulary for it when I was 20 years old. But I knew in my heart, no, I was being honest. I would be hot if you guys hooked up.
I mean, I can completely see that too, just because if we started this relationship with me knowing what that you were part of that lifestyle. So I had that expectation. I knew there were going to be challenges in that way. So I can only imagine that if I was in a relationship and someone else suggested that, I feel like I would immediately feel rejected.
Yeah, and that's imagine now being 20 years old,
Right.
and
Oh,
having
Lord.
a lot less life experience than we have now, both of us.
Yeah.
Feelings get hurt really quickly, and even if you're not as young, feelings still can get hurt if you just come from different backgrounds and you're just not as experienced sometimes.
I think the question was more just on a personal, like, have you ever had a hard time getting over an ex?
Of course. Oh, I mean, me personally, I am very, very, very sensitive to breakups. I don't, like, I know people that are like, oh, whatever, I broke up with my partner and now this is David and now we're going out. Like, that's not me. I can't, even if, and I have jumped from relationship to relationship, and it's still like, even if I'm with someone new that I fall in love with very quickly, it doesn't make the last one hurt any less.
Right.
And it's still there and is very, very much part of my narrative.
Oh, yeah. One of your exes was a part of our life in the beginning of the relationship. And
yeah, a little bit. But for me, that ex that you're speaking of, the ex before that was part of our relationship for even longer than the last one was part of ours.
Yeah.
So it is tough. And then when you're breaking some eggs with the whole non-monogamy stuff, then you're adding a layer to it that you can't always ask your friends for advice from, because they'll be like, well, you guys were cheating on each other. You guys had a don't ask, don't tell policy. Whatever they think of or project onto your non-monogamous relationship as whatever it was, there's always those friends that are going to be like, well, you kind of did this to yourself, and kind of blame you because you're not following the monogamy model that they're accustomed to. So I know it's with when you add that layer onto a heartbreak that really, really hurts, sometimes it feels like you're even more alone because you're choosing the E&M track.
Right. I mean, I've been in, I guess, 4 serious relationships. One when I was 19, one when I was right after that, my ex that I was with, and then I was single for about 5 years, and then I was with my ex before you, and really the only one, and it wasn't, I loved each of them very deeply. I would say, just being honest, the very first one was kind of like my really first experience with like being in love with someone. Like, I will go to the ends of the earth for you, let's be together forever. And then at that point, I was with a woman, and she was not comfortable being gay. And so when she ended things with me, it was just, I did not see it coming at all. And I was just heartbroken, like sitting in my room, crying for hours. And also at that point, like my parents had, like my family, I had told them that I was into women before, but it never really, I wasn't in a relationship before her. And so I was living back at home after I graduated from undergrad, and just being alone in a dark room. And then finally I was just like, my mom came in and she was like, what's wrong? I'm like, you know what's wrong. Like, this person broke my heart. And then other than that, my other 2 relationships, they had just kind of come to an end on their own. I'm still good friends. I texted her the other day. And then the one that was before you, we are not friends. She blocked me pretty quickly, but then she started dating the one that she told me not to worry about. So I was like, get fucked.
Yeah, and you still bring up that story, so clearly,
yeah,
everyone
pissed me off.
Still stings. It still stings.
Okay, what helped with that healing? So after this person's ex moved on, been stuck on her, and haven't been able to have a serious relationship since. Does that feeling of love return? It seems like only now it's just like it can't really commit, and it's depressing. For me, it took of years and years for the love of my the first love of my life to go away, and I didn't think that I would ever be the same. And legitimately, like I said, I loved my other exes, but it was like you were the first person that I had fallen in love with again after it was like took 10 years. And I will say I don't necessarily, like, I do think time obviously helps, and it sucks because it's the one thing that you can't control, but I learned how to process things differently. I learned how to let myself feel things, let myself like be sad, but then also open the idea that maybe there's something better for me. Like maybe there's something different. And I mean, it happened, but you have to just have that belief and like faith in love and your, what you have to enrich someone else's life in order to be open and receptive to a new love. But yeah, what about you?
In terms of being
What
able to
what helps
process.
you get over like a serious love? Also, I'm
Yeah.
sorry you're going through that.
Yeah.
It's not, that fucking sucks.
I think just really focusing on the things that you enjoy, the self-care projects, the little things that go a long way.
Learn how to fall in love with yourself.
Learning, that's the big thing. It's like, okay, you're now outside of a relationship, and oftentimes when me personally, a relationship usually ends because I do fall out of my love with myself before I fall out of love with the person that I'm with. So it is about doing those self-care projects. For me, eating healthier, I'll deviate from feeling good about myself. Therapy, of course, counseling. It can be online therapy often. Now they've made it very accessible. Or just even finding a community. And I know for a lot of people, they live in more rural areas. And if, you're E&M, then the areas might feel even smaller. But online communities have really helped people. I wouldn't say necessarily Reddit, because sometimes that just is even more of a negative trap. But finding, when I was out of a relationship, I just started finding like a local, not necessarily meetup group. I think like the actual meetup.com stuff isn't really a thing like it was 10 years ago. But finding like a local group, like even a whiskey tasting group, it's like something where you have something in common with other people, where you can just get dressed, feel good about presenting yourself to the world, even if it's just for a half hour, and going out there and talking to just one person. Where sometimes I've gone out and I'm like, okay, even smaller steps. I went to like an open mic night for sex positive people. And I went in thinking, okay, maybe I'll talk to one person. But the first time I went, I just sat at the bar and watched the show by myself. And then the second time, I'm like, okay, I'm going to talk to one person. But then one person talked to me. And then the third time I went, I'm like, okay, now I'll talk. And then it was a lot easier. So those were the tiny little steps that I had to take. But it was at my own pace.
I want to respond to also love whiskey. So this person says that they were the one who broke up with her because like they thought that they weren't good enough for her at the time. And that's, I think, going back to the learning how to fall in love with yourself. Like the only person, and I try to tell this to people, the only person that you're going to have for your entire life, guaranteed, never leaving, is you. So fall in love with yourself. Like the only person that you have to be good enough for is you. And when you become, when you love yourself, it makes you a better partner. And then it's about, not being good enough for someone or this or that. It's I think that leads to a healthier way to look at relationships. And there's such a thing called self-sabotage. Some people find they like the chaos of or they have unresolved issues from their past, and it still is so with them in the present that you just want to sabotage yourself. So I think therapy is a really good thing for everyone. I feel like everyone should have a therapist, and trying to learn and feeling good about yourself. And then when that happens, you do become, better, the better being relative, but feeling good within. Happiness comes from within. So that's my... Oh, and I will say one other thing that I heard one time about ending a relationship or coming to the end of a relationship and why it's so hard. And basically it was like, well, when you're in a relationship with someone, or multiple people, whoever, you kind of develop a separate language. Like you have your inside jokes, you have, their habits, like you create a separate language. And when that relationship ends, like a language is lost, and that's really hard. So allow yourself the time to mourn and to grieve that loss, because it is a significant loss. But then try to grow. Like there are very few things that are forever. So I thought that was a really interesting way to look at it. Hey, well, thanks for saying this is good advice. But the only way that you can stop self-sabotaging is to get on better terms with yourself. And it takes a lot of really hard work to do that. But in the end, you come out on the other side. And again, just for you, because you're the only person that you're going to have forever. So be kind to yourself. Know that you're going to make mistakes. Know that you're not always going to handle everything the best way, but, keep moving forward. Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, that was a tangent, but
right. It's all part of the live forum.
Yes.
So, anyways, so getting a little bit back on track with opening a relationship and or marriage or whatever have you. The other question I will get in the DMs is like, oh, well, what was your experience like? I'm sure it was a great experience because, you and Chelsea as a couple, I'm sure that you're an expert in all this. And this fantasy that everything has always worked out perfectly then, now, and forever. And that is obviously not true. And for often people... a lot of their first experiences aren't good, hope not traumatic, but I know so many are. For me, as a guy navigating in this world, I felt when I first had my first foursome with another couple, when I was 22 years old. We did it off of OkCupid. Yes. No. Sorry. It was still Craigslist.
Oh, Craigslist.
It was 2009. It was 2009, and Craigslist and OkCupid was a thing, but I don't think OkCupid had couples at the time. But yeah, Craigslist casual encounters, and it was a lot of sifting through, obviously, people who didn't have the language for any of this stuff. But, the long and short of it was just trying to find another couple that wasn't creepy about it. And again, going back to the only tools that we had at the time. What do you mean
by creepy? Expand on creepy.
Like catfishing. Literally catfishing.
Or not communicating things beforehand.
But it was a lot of single older men posing as couples.
Don't do that.
And I fell into that a couple times in the Midwest. But this, we can kind of get a sense that they're actually a couple. We met up with each other at a gay bar, and it was with another guy who was a little bit, again, men talking to other men about this, it's still a faux pas. And I could tell he was a little bit flexible with his sexuality, which helps having a more sexually fluid guy there, always in my experience.
Comment.
Yes.
When I came across your pages, the first thing that went through my head was, how is Matt not going crazy with jealousy?
Whew. Well, going back to, my first girlfriend, it's like the idea of my partner sleeping with someone else, it gives me that adrenaline rush, that sort of dopamine release. And instead of feeling angry about it, I just feel aroused about it. And then the first sexual experience that I had when I was dating someone with another couple confirmed everything about that. My first girlfriend broke up with me because I even suggested, hey, why don't you sleep with another guy that I know you have a crush on? And then my second girlfriend was like, yeah, hell, let's do it. But we didn't have the resources to really communicate about it well. But after that first encounter, things got a little dicey because the only thing that we had at the time was old reruns of Loveline. Does anyone remember?
I don't even
Loveline from the late 90s, early 2000s with Dr. Drew and Adam Carolla, who are terrible. They have terrible politics, especially by today's standards.
Okay.
But Dan Savage wasn't really... I mean, he was around then, obviously, but
yeah, Dan Savage hosts a
podcast,
yeah, like
and he had a sex advice column for going back to the early 90s, at least. He's been around for a minute, and he's more the go-to. And I know that some of the queer community doesn't always agree with everything he says either, but we're going back to like the really just terrible advice days. But it was one of the few things that we had as an option. And because we just didn't have the right tools, my ex and I just didn't communicate very well after that. Mm-hmm. And I didn't practice non-monogamy and with a partner again for like 3 or 4 years.
I think there's also an aspect because I get pleasure from seeing other people experience pleasure. So in terms of, and there's a book called The Ethical Slut that, that has an entire chapter on, I don't think I have like my little notes that I made, big nerd. But yeah, there's an entire, oh my God, I had just flipped right to it. That was crazy. About jealousy and, and so outside of like when I finally got ready for us to like do a full swap with another couple, I was like so nervous. And then I was like, okay, like play this out. So you go like, what's my fear? My fear is that Matt will sleep with another girl. He'll fuck another girl and then they will fall in love and I will be left alone and crying. And like the thought of that was so scary for me. And I just had to, I was like, okay, play it out. That does happen. Like this person, this couple, they were engaged. So I was making wild assumptions about not based really in reality, based on past issues that I hadn't solved within myself. And so it was like, play this out. Say that happens, that right after y'all, and like I was a person who I've always been fine with, like I've been able to separate sex from feelings. To me, sex can just be sex. So I was like, okay, play it out. They have sex and then they fall in love and he doesn't want to come home with me. And I'm like, do I really want to be with someone who would do that? Like, no. And so however it played out, I'm like, I just like, this is going to be telling for me. And so we did it and then it was great and it was hot. And then they stayed home and we came home and it was like, oh, that thing that I was so scared of didn't even come close to happening. Like, so I was holding myself back, in doing that. So that's kind of how my jealousy,
the sky did not fall.
Yes. Yes.
I mean, it's falling, but nothing that you did.
Yeah.
Nothing that you did. Yeah, and then on the flip side of that, like, well, first of all, you were a little bit different than other past New York and all of its sounds. So you were a little bit different in the fact that you were recognizing the imbalance between me being just very into you being with other people and it not being reciprocated. Mm-hmm. But you recognize what the issue was within yourself and you actually took action. Mm-hmm. Whereas in other relationships that I've been in that haven't worked out, sometimes they would recognize the issue within themselves and put it on me to solve it for them. And there is definitely a way to communicate and assure the other person through like reading a book together or going to, there's one partner, we went to different poly seminars at a feminist bookstore in the East Village. We would do like meetup groups. We'd go to like pre-sex party events where you're just mingling with people and no one has their clothes off. Doing all those things and still they're like, well, you're responsible for me being jealous is not, it's not a healthy way to go about things.
Well, no one will ever the only person who will ever make you change anything about yourself is you. And if you change for someone else, all that's going to do is harbor resentment and things go poorly from there. So any type of, if you want to be different, if you want to be something, like you have to do it yourself. Yeah. Otherwise it's not going to work.
Yeah. And that relationship in particular too, it was like the books were there, the feminist bookstore meetups were there, all those things were there. And then also at the end of the day, it was like, hey, you might be okay with me sleeping with other people, but I am not okay with you sleeping with other people, specifically other women. And I may never get there. And that's something that you're going to have to either accept. Because I don't want there to be resentment to build.
Question
yes.
Related. Are you guys technically swingers? Guess you need a certain amount of not being insecure to be able to be poly. I learned that there are multiple terminology. There are different terms. Like poly is, and this is just my understanding, poly is having romantic, emotional relationships with more than one person at one time. Swingers are more, it's you and your partner, another person and their partner, and you play with each other or swap, and there is no emotion involved. Like you're just there for sex. And so I wouldn't say that I'm opposed to, having a relationship, but I don't really have the capacity for another relationship just because I think I try to give 100% to all the things that I do. And so I don't think that I have the time or the energy to be able to properly have a romantic relationship with someone else. So I would say I don't know.
I would consider myself to be just underneath the umbrella of ethical non-monogamy for a couple reasons. Polyamorous, I echo what you had said. Often there's hierarchical, non-hierarchical polyamory. Hierarchical is like you have you and your nesting partner. Nesting being like think of like a bird's nest. Like you're literally living with someone and you have a life together. And then you have other sort of satellite lovers that aren't at the same kind of blend of commitment that you are with your partner. And that forms a hierarchy. And there are people that argue whether or not that's ethical. But again, I think if you're all in agreement to the power structure and being very aware of the power structure and where that lies, for example, recognizing that if you and your nesting partner are dating another woman, there's things about couples privilege and veto power amongst the couple. saying
rules,
that
like
rules,
boundaries.
yes. And
boundaries.
again, those things, there's arguments again whether or not having couples privilege or a veto power over a third person that's not a nesting partner is ethical. And I think those are the little nuances that define what polyamory means for that particular group. Because if we go to a polyamory mixer of some sort, often the question is by the hosts, no less, well, what does polyamory mean to you? Because even as an American, I know it's different than what my Canadian friends say it is. So it's individual, but yes, I do think it's a committed partner. I remember once I was hanging out with this woman who's married, and I was with her husband at an event, and the woman that I was sleeping with, the woman I was sleeping with wasn't there. It was just me and her husband were hanging out together. And he introduced me to somebody as saying, oh, hey, this is Matt. He's dating my wife. And in my mind, I was like, what? I'm dating your wife? I mean, we hooked up a couple times.
News to me.
But in their terminology of what polyamory was, like, I was dating his wife. Obviously, they're in a marriage. And I was in a polyamorous situation with the three of them, and I didn't even know that. But by their definition, I was.
See, that's to me, I'm like, all right, there's a lack of communication there.
Right, yeah. But swinging, though, oh, man. So swinging is, in my definition, far, far more transactional. I think polyamory can be very transactional, but it's a little bit, sometimes polyamory can put on this academic mask over how transactional it could be.
But see, if it's just transactional, then and again, I have much less experience with these terminologies, but if it's like poly means deeper than transactional,
Sure.
more emotion. So
yeah,
I feel like if it's transactional, that doesn't feel
that swinging is
yeah, because swinging, like the couples.
Well, I'm saying that swinging is transactional.
Yeah, but yeah. I thought you said polyamory.
Well, I also am just sidebarring the idea that sometimes couples say they're polyamorous, but it's just swinging with extra jargon attached to it. Sometimes.
I guess it depends on the individual.
It depends on the couple, because I think couples will say they're polyamorous to allow them into spaces to unicorn hunt and cruise.
Yeah. And
they'll say or do anything in order to get what they want, including pretending that they're part of a polycule, or they understand what polyamory is. They've done the emotional labor when really they haven't. And
comment said he's dating my wife. Sounds like a Lifetime movie. He's dating my wife.
Maybe.
Yeah. Soon. What about being insecure? Do you think I mean, I feel like there are plenty of people who are insecure and in the world.
Well, yeah, I think sometimes, and you don't always know it at the same time. It's very normal for couples where you both agree to it at the time, but then as you're practicing it, the old one is, okay, you realize that your wife is going to be sleeping with a lot more people than the husband is. And it becomes apparent after that first week that she's gotten 100 messages in her inbox. And then you're starting to compare and being like, wait a minute, I've sent 100 messages and I've gotten no replies. And that reality starts sinking in. That I've heard many, many times from many different people over the years. And that's a very true reality. And you have to be prepared for that. Although I don't think both going into it and being like, okay, we're just going to start our own separate dating profiles, and you do your thing and I'll do my thing, and then we'll meet up later and compare notes. I don't recommend that model. I recommend going into it more together first, slowly, by maybe reading a book or going to a meetup group or going to a social mixer, and absolutely does not have to involve alcohol, and actually don't encourage it. and then maybe experimenting sexually once you've had longer conversations about what your insecurities are, what your fears are, and ensuring that your partner has taken your insecurities seriously and has taken your thoughts about going about it seriously, rather than jumping on field and having your separate profiles and then meeting up later on. So I that's my way of recommending to go about it. And I think that really overcomes a lot of those initial pitfalls, I would say. And then especially like, you know, you're a couple, you're going into it together, and then just one person just realizes, oh man, I am not into this like I thought I would be into it, but I don't want to like ruin it for my partner. They're having a great time, so I'm just not going to say anything.
But then boom, you've just cut off the communication, and now you're, you know, and I think it's also, you know, like I get messages in my inbox, and you know, I'm just not, like I said, I don't feel like I have the capacity for another like relationship, and so that's not what I'm looking for. And so when it comes to feeling insecure about like your partner, it's like, well, do you trust them? And if you don't trust them, why? Is there a reason for it? Like, what are you feeling insecure about? Are you insecure in the relationship? And does that go back to somehow being insecure about yourself? Have you tried to identify it? And have you thought about, you know, if you've identified it, are you trying to change it? Like, I think there are a lot of different ways to look at it. But yeah, I definitely struggled with a lot of my own insecurities in the beginning, over the years, many times.
What insecurities?
Yeah, but you only grow if you try. Oh, ouch, that would suck if you're not into it and your partner is.
That happens so often.
We see that,
pretty
pretty frequently.
And sometimes things can escalate for one partner, but the interests remain the same for the other. Like, I know people that have just wanted to open up the relationship, but then the other partner started getting more into like kink, bondage play. And then it escalated where she had a dom with sadistic tendencies. It was, you know, opted into that, but then seeing her husband less and less, and seeing this sadistic dom more and more, and coming home to a bunch of marks on her body from their.
And then at that point, you should ask yourself, like, does this still make me happy? Is the relationship still in a place where I want it to be? And, you know, go from there.
Don't let those check-ins go don't wait too long before having a good check-in. A conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's important to check in.
Because, you know, especially when you do make that decision into like, okay, now I want to open up my relationship, my marriage. For me, and I know that this has made exes struggle a lot, is that when I meet someone, I have to be very aware of my what's called new relationship energy. So I meet someone new that I'm hanging out with and sleeping with, and I am like, I get addicted to that little dopamine rush.
Yeah, that's like the fun. That's the most fun part. You don't know all of their horrible traumas yet, unless you share them on the second date in a cab.
Well, yeah.
That was me. I did that.
But yeah, like you're exploring someone's body for the first time, and it's new and it's exciting, and it's different than you know you're touching and you're like, oh, this feels different, not any better or worse, but different than my own partner's body, and it's it's kind of cool and taboo that you're having this consensual moment with someone, knowing that your partner also consented as well, and that's very exciting. But
and then on the other person's end, like if you're going through that, then now I need to check in with myself. Like, I've heard advice that, you know, on nights where, you know, you have a partner and they have a date with someone else, take that as a night not to be like, okay, now I'm going to plan a date. So I'm not there just thinking about it and freaking out. It's, well, you can do that. Or use that as a night for self-care. Like, they are enjoying their time with someone else, and use that as a time to enjoy time with yourself. And, think about, why am I nervous? Like, okay, play it out. If they start liking each other, like, what does that mean for me? And just as important as your partner check-ins are, your individual check-ins are also extremely important, and staying on top of your feelings and how you navigate them.
Yeah, so the word for being happy for your partner going out and doing their own thing is called compersion, and compersion comes naturally, or you have to learn it. And for me, it's come naturally, and I know I struggle sometimes because partners I've had had to be learned. And you just have to respect that.
Like, he had E&M in his profile because we met on an app.
Tinder, if you've heard of it.
No, this is a new app called Tinder. So he had that in his app, and my kind of interest in that was sparked by my ex before, who was a woman and was pretty, did not like even seeing me get hit on in bars. And I've known I was pansexual for a very long time. And, I couldn't say that if I thought another guy was attractive, or if even less another girl was attractive. And so at the end of the relationship, we're arguing, and, I was saying something like, it just sucks that I can't, like, I have to pretend that I'm not even attracted to another group of people that I was open to you about being attracted to. And she was just like, well, if you feel the need to enjoy both, then it sounds like you're just looking for non-monogamy. And I was like, well, that's not what that means, but that actually, maybe I am. So that was kind of where I felt like my own personal jump to.
Yeah, it's funny how some people make that into an insult.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or
how dare you still be you
or
forever?
For me, it was dating women, and me suggesting being experimental in some way. It's like, what do you like, dick or something?
Yeah.
Wait, maybe?
Yeah.
I also do that?
Yeah.
What?
Because I always knew, I always knew I was pansexual. So one of the things that always kind of made me sad was thinking that I was going to be monogamous. And I'm like, because I could always see myself ending up with either man, either woman, it's something in between. And I just was like, that makes me sad. Like, if I end up with a guy, I'm going to have to give up women. Like, have you seen women? And if my experience had been with a lot of women, and I was like, oh, I know they don't like it when I'm attracted to men. And that always made me sad. And so opening these doors, I was like, oh, you really can have it all. So.
Right. Yeah. It is funny because it's like being pansexual, from like gay men are always like, oh, you're just greedy. And in this case, sometimes I am. Like broken clock is right twice a day. Am I right, y'all? Yeah. But it is what it is. I want to do this again. I want to get more into different types of relationship models next time, because the other thing that I think people are trying to say that they want something and they don't quite know how they want to articulate it. So expanding on what different types of polyamory perhaps are, going more into swinging. Some things, I don't mind swingers at all. Again, I think if you're all consenting to it, great.
Yeah.
There's just certain things that about swinging, some kind of energy sometimes they put out in the world where it's a little cringe. And especially, just want to allude to this for next time, because I did want to talk about unicorn hunting, and you've been part of that. And but I think for some pansexual and bisexual women, they go onto an app meant for monogamous dating, and all they get are couples. And it's very frustrating for a lot of my bi lady friends to navigate
I
these
loved
worlds.
being the unicorn.
You did, and I think that's another conversation. I want to expand on that one.
Yeah.
And also for
Got 45 seconds.
45 seconds. Well, I also started this a little
okay.
bit late too. Relationship anarchy and solo polyamory. Those are the other ones I want to touch on.
All
next
right,
time.
making notes to look those up.
Have you heard of relationship anarchy?
No.
Yeah.
But we don't have the time to get
No.
to that right now.
No, I'm just curious though. And yeah, other
And then,
media,
also being
movies.
content creators, like,
Yeah.
kind of what that looks like behind the scenes. Yeah.
Do you want to plug anything?
My OnlyFans and my
Wait,
socials.
you have an OnlyFans?
I know. This person said I'm not even in a relationship, but you guys were cool to listen to.
Okay.
So thanks for tuning in.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right.
Cool.
Gonna
All right.
stop the stream.
Checking out.